All right,
Yeah.
welcome back. Today we will be continuing Maimonides' introduction to Perek Helek, part of his introduction to the Mishnah or his commentary to the Mishnah, introduction to the chapter that deals with Olam Haba, Kol Yisrael, Yesh Lahem Helek LeOlam Haba, and as we saw in the previous class, right, there are disputes among the people, or different opinions. I don't really call it disputes because it's not really among the Hachamim. Different opinions. What is the ultimate reward for keeping the mitzvot, for following the Torah? And we saw some say it's Gan Eden, right? The Garden of Eden. One day we will enter the Garden of Eden, and the punishment for not following the mitzvot is we're going to hell, right? And the Rambam says, okay, maybe these things, there is such thing as these things, but this isn't the ultimate reward and punishment, right? Or maybe it's all the berachot, the blessings promised in the Torah, and the punishment for not following the Torah is all the curses that are mentioned in the Torah. Another opinion says it's Yemot HaMashiach, being able to live in the times of the Mashiach, that is the ultimate reward. Another opinion says it's being resurrected from the dead, that is the reward that you get for being righteous, and the punishment is to not be resurrected. And the Rambam says, but this one subtle thing called Olam Haba, this world to come, nobody really bothers with it. No one really understands it. And is that the ultimate reward, or one of these other previous things the ultimate reward? And all these other things, maybe they're just a means to an end, a way for us, or enable us to get to Olam Haba, or to fully experience Olam Haba. And he says, I'm going to give you a little parable, right? People or children, when they grow up, they don't really understand the value of education, of learning to read. And in order to motivate someone who is immature, who is not fully developed, you need to find some other way to motivate him, something that speaks to him. So when he's small, when he's young, you say, okay, read a pasuk, read a little pirasha, and I'm going to give you some candies. And eventually, as he grows, candies doesn't fit him as much. And you say, okay, so study, and I'm going to give you, I'll give you clothing, I'll give you money, I'll get you a beautiful car, whatever it is that motivates him. Eventually, he'll be motivated by honor. They'll stand up for you when you walk into the room. And he says, but all this isn't really proper, isn't right. What's the real purpose of acquiring an education? What's the ultimate reward for becoming wise? The ultimate reward for studying and acquiring an education is the education itself. It's being wise. It's being able to navigate the world with open eyes and know what you're doing and understand what's going on. You shouldn't need any external motivation for it. Same with the Torah. What is the ultimate reward for the Torah, for keeping the Torah? The Hachamim say, Sechar mitzvah, mitzvah. Right? The reward for a mitzvah is the mitzvah. The beracha that we got is the Torah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. He gave us a just and perfect Torah, a way for us to live in a proper society, to live under a justice system that does justice to everybody. The ultimate, really, our ultimate motivation for keeping the Torah should be that this is the truth, this is the proper way to behave, and nothing else. However, not everybody is really capable of that. All right, ulefi, and this is where we left off last time. He says, really, and that's called oved me'ahava, someone who keeps the Torah for the sake of following the Torah, only because God commanded that we follow the Torah, and we trust that God is giving us a right direction. That's called oved me'ahava, to worship God out of love, and not out of any fear of punishment, and not out of some sort of anticipation for a reward, but because it's the right thing to do. ולפי שידעו החכמים זיכרונם לברכה, and since the Hachamim, they knew, they understood, שזה העניין קשה עד מאוד, that this is very difficult for people to do, ואין כל אדם משיג אותו, and not every individual can rise to this level where his sole motivation for following the Torah and the mitzvot is because God wants him to and nothing else. ואם השיגו אינו מסכים בו בתכלית העניין, and even if he does get to this level, it's not something that you get to right away. It's not you're born into, that's your character. You keep the mitzvot because you keep the mitzvot. It's something that you have to learn. ואינו סובר שתהיה אמונה ברורה, לפי שאדם אינו עושה מעשה אלא כדי שתגיע לו ממנו תועלת. Man, human nature, doesn't do things if it's not for some sort of reward or benefit. או שתסור ממנו הפסד, or in order to avoid some sort of downfall. Everything we do for a purpose. We need to understand that purpose. Otherwise, we're not going to bother. If you don't understand the meaning of what we're doing, then we're not really motivated to do it. The problem with keeping the mitzvot is that sometimes the meaning behind the mitzvot is way beyond our understanding. And if he doesn't understand why he's doing something, then that action he'll perceive as a futile action, a meaningless action. והאח נאמר לבעל תורה עשה אלה המעשים ואל תעשם אותם. And how are you going to come to someone who's religious, someone who believes in God, and say, do these actions, or abstain from doing these certain actions, these averot, these transgressions, לא לירא מעונש מן השם יתברך, not for fear of some sort of punishment from God, ולא לתקוות שכר טוב ממנו, and not for some sort of anticipation of reward from God. So I believe in God. God wants me to do things. Okay, it's very, very common belief that God punishes for doing bad and rewards for doing good. זה דבר קשה עד מאוד. This is very, very difficult to tell someone, no, just do these things. There's no such thing as reward and punishment. Just do it because God wants you to do it. That's if I don't do it, I'm not going to hell. It's like, no, you're not going to hell. If I do it, am I not going to? No, there's no such. Let's pretend there's no such thing as heaven and hell. No, just do it. Why? Because there's this old textbook from 3,000 or 5,000 years ago that says this is what you should be doing. לפי שאין כל בני אדם משיגים האמת עד שיהיו כמו אברהם אבינו עליו השלום, because not everybody is able to understand, perceive the truth the way Abraham Avinu did. Not everybody is as intellectually advanced, is able to understand the rationale behind everything. And even if it's not behind everything, understand enough to know that if God is giving us mitzvot, it's just, that's the right thing to do. There's a reason for it. ולכן הטילו להמון, and therefore the Hachamim, they permitted for the sake of the masses, so that people do follow the Torah and the mitzvot, כדי שיתיישבו על אמונתם, so that, you know, they accept that God exists, and God rewards for good deeds, and God punishes bad deeds. They said, yeah, go ahead, explain this to people same way that you motivate a child with external motivations, because he doesn't understand the value of what he's actually doing. To motivate him enough with that, motivate him with something else. לעשות המצוות לתקוות זכר. So do the mitzvot for the sake of receiving a reward. So that's what we'll tell the masses. You will receive a reward for doing the mitzvot, ולהינזל מן העבירות, and to mirat onish, and to stay away from transgressions for fear of getting punished. So the Hachamim, they say, yeah, we'll educate the masses because they aren't developed enough to understand the virtue of what they're doing, and the damage that they'll be doing to themselves by doing the averot. We'll tell them, we'll like bring it down to a level that they understand of a reward and punishment. It's like, what's the punishment a person gets for sticking his finger in the electric socket, right? It's a consequence. You get shocked. You'll suffer pain. But some people, they can't understand. Like if they're still children and they don't understand electricity and how it works and the damage that could be caused by doing a bad thing, you have to tell them you'll get smacked by the wall, by the electricity. You'll receive some sort of punishment. ומזרזים אותם על זה ומחזקים כוונתם עד שישיג המשיג וידע האמת והדרך השלם מהו. So we tell people to do the mitzvot to get reward, and we say, oh, I remember growing up as a child, we say every mitzvah you do, we used to my parents and my grandparents used to say every mitzvah that you do, you get another brick in your house in Olam Haba. So if you do a lot of mitzvot, you have tons of brick, you have a huge house, right? So the more righteous, the bigger houses. Olam Haba has no houses, right? There are no bricks. But this was a way to motivate us to do mitzvot, right? So we say you have good intentions, right? You want to do mitzvot. This is what you'll get. You'll get a great Olam Haba. Or you'll be neighbors with celebrities or something, right? In Olam Haba. There's no such thing as any of that. But this is a way to motivate someone who can't understand what Olam Haba is, in order to bring him forward, to evolve him and elevate him to a higher level. Right, on their intentions, and we say you'll get like these rewards, these great things, right? Because as he acquires an education, as he performs the mitzvot, they elevate him, and they elevate his understanding to a place where maybe he'll perceive, one day he'll actually understand what Olam Haba is, and how great it is to do the mitzvot just for the sake of doing the mitzvot. וידע האמת והדרך השלם מהו, and he understands the right way to behave. כמו שעושים בנער, as we do with a child, בשעת הלימוד, כמו שהבאתי המשל, as in the parable that I brought previously, that we studied last week, that we motivate children with all sort of external factors, and as they evolve, they're no longer motivated by candies, They're motivated by something a little more subtle, right? Like maybe looking good, uh, motivated by something that'll give them social status, right? It becomes more and more subtle with time as they develop and evolve. והאשימו לאנטיגונו שיסוכו בבערו להמון מה שביער, ואמרו בזה, חכמים, היזהרו בדבריכם. Forward and he said, don't be like the servants who serve their masters for the sake of a reward. He says you should be like the servants who serve their masters, not for any reward, just because, right, your teacher has a lot to teach you. And the more time you spend with him and the more you serve him, the more you learn from him how to be a better person. Right? It says, "Al tiyu ka'avadim המשמשים את הרב על מנת לקבל פרס." He says you should do it for the sake of spending more time with them, learning his ways, learning how to be a better person. And the Hachamim, they rebuked him for saying that. He said, Hachamim hizaru b'divrechem. He says, be careful with what you say, because not everybody could understand what you mean. And this was actually the, how do you call it? This is what caused the whole Sadoki movement, was that some of his students later came and said, wait a minute, if there's no reward and there's no punishment, that's what they heard from what he said. If there's really no such thing as reward and punishment, then why keep the mitzvot at all? And he caused a lot of people, and they started a movement that brought a lot of people off the way of keeping Torah. That's not really what he intended. That's how they understood it. He says, Hachamim, the other Hachamim said, Hachamim hizaru b'divrechem. Careful with what you say. He says, it's possible that your students that come after you will misinterpret what you say and go out into galut. Right? כמו שנתבהר באבות. ואין ההמון מפסידים מכל וכל בעשותם המצוות מיראת העונש ותקוות השכר. And this, that the masses, right, the general public, that they follow the mitzvot for an anticipation of a reward, and they refrain from doing avirot, right, because they are afraid of receiving a punishment. It says, "Lo mafsidim." This doesn't detract from their doing the mitzvot and abstaining from averot. So it's better that they do the mitzvot anticipating a reward than they don't do the mitzvot at all. So this, that they're not fully developed in order to understand the value of the mitzvot in themselves, and they do it for some sort of external motivation, he says it's fine. It's not such a big deal. It's just that they're not perfect. They're not fully matured and developed. But it's still fine. And this is good for them to do the mitzvot. עד שיהיה להם כוח והרגל והשתדלות בעשיית התורה. Right? So it's still good for them so that they develop the proper habits that the Torah wants you to have, which build up the proper character, which the Torah wants you to have by doing the mitzvot. And by doing this, even if it's from external motivation, they will learn the truth. They will behave properly. This proper behavior builds up good character. This good character also forms your mind, your way of thinking, and eventually you'll understand. You'll further develop and you'll understand. And eventually they will worship God out of love, which is the highest form of worship. וזהו מה שאמרו זיכרונם לברכה, לעולם יעסוק אדם בתורה, אפילו שלא נשמע. This is what the Hachamim say. A person should always observe the Torah. ואפילו שלא נשמע, even not for the sake of observing the Torah, but for some sort of external motivation. שמתוך לא נשמע, בא לשמה. Right? By observing the Torah, not for the sake of the Torah, eventually you will transition to a state where you're observing Torah for the sake of the Torah. So mitoch shelo nishma, ba nishma. From not for its sake, you will evolve to a state where you are observing the Torah for the sake of the Torah. And that is oved me'ahava. Umima she'ata sarich nada'at. And this, we're moving on to another section, another chapter, which you need to understand, right? This, that the Hachamim, they use external motivations, and they use parables, right? So he said, like, so if you stick your finger in the socket, you get shot. Is it a punishment for doing something that's forbidden, or it's a bad consequence? So you could tell a child it's a punishment. All right, so you're using some sort of like a parable. You have to understand, this is the way the Hachamim speak. In regards to the statements of the Hachamim, right? Peace be upon them, right? There are three sects of three types of people and how they understand the statements of Hachamim. Harishona vehem rov ma sheraiti, right? The first sect, the first type, is the majority of the people who I've seen. It's probably the majority of the people I have seen as well. Maybe the second is the majority today, but we'll see. Ma sheraiti hiburav, who I've seen their articles and their books. Uma sheshamati alav, and the people that I've heard. Hem ma'aminim otam al pishatam. Says they take the statements of the Hachamim and they understand them literally. If the Hachamim said that in Yemot HaMashiach trees are going to grow fully sewed garments, right, clothing, then they say, okay, well, if the Hachamim said it, then it must be true, right? And in Yemot HaMashiach, we're going to have trees. We're going to have Armani trees. We're going to have Zara trees. We're going to have whatever your favorite brand of clothing is. They'll have their own trees, and you just go plant it in your backyard. And the next year, you just pick suits and clothing off your trees, right? So they believe the statements of the Hachamim literally. If the Hachamim said something, it's going to be exactly as they said. And they don't even try to delve into what is the hidden meaning behind what the Hachamim are saying. Maimonides and the philosophers that divide the world into three categories, reality into three categories. There are things that are impossible, things that are possible, and things that have to be. It's mehuyava metziyut. There is no reality without it, and that is the reality of God Himself, nothing else. And there are things that are impossible. Things that are impossible, like the Rambam he gives, picturing a person whose head is in the skies and his feet is on the ground, this super giant, right? This is impossible. So all these impossible things become mehuyava mitzvot, have to be absolute reality. Why? Because the Hachamim said it. So as they said it, as is, that's how it's going to be in reality. ואומנם עושים כן לפי שלא הבינו החוכמות. And why do they do this? Because they have no training in science and philosophy. והם רחוקים מן התבונות. And they have no understanding. ואין בהם מן השלמות כדי שיתעוררו בעיניהם. And they don't have any of these, we'll call it intellectual virtues, that they can say, wait a minute, this can't possibly be. And not only that, but if you have this kind of intellectual training, then you know that the way the Hachamim speak is in parables and in what's it called, in chidot, in how do you call it, riddles and parables, and they speak poetically, and they very rarely mean what they say literally. ולא מצאו מעורר שיעורר אותם. Not only that, but because they have no scientific training, then they don't see any contradiction between the statement of the Hachamim and what's possible. Anything is possible. It's like a magical thinking. Anything the Hachamim say, well, if they said it, yeah, anything could happen. Hocus pocus, and it happens. Doesn't need to be grounded in reality. And there's nobody to awaken them to this belief. וסוברים שלא כיוונו החכמים בכל דבריהם הישרים והמתוקנים, אלא מה שהבינו לפי דעתם מהם. Right? And in their opinion, what the Hachamim said, that's what they intended, as they themselves understand it. They who have no no scientific and intellectual training, how they perceive what the Hachamim said, that is what the Hachamim meant. V'shehem al pishtam, and that it's their literal meaning. ואף על פי שהנראה מקצת דבריהם יש מן הדיבה והריחוק מן השכל, and even though some of the things that the Hachamim say in the Midrashim are extremely bizarre and completely unrealistic, עד שאפילו יסופר על פשוטו לעמי הארץ, that even if you go to any of the nations, ask anybody and tell them these stories that the Hachamim say, especially to the wise people among the nations, כל שכן לחכמים היו תמהים בהתבוננותם בהם והיו אומרים, says they would be astonished, they'd be stunned. How is it that people believe these things? איך ייתכן שיהיה בעולם אדם שיחשוב בזה כך? How is it possible that there's any mature, right, grown human being that can believe in these impossible, unrealistic things? Or שיאמין שהיא אמונה נכונה, or believe that it's possible and that it's true. קל וחומר שייטב בעיניו, even more so that he'll find some sort of great satisfaction, some sort of great virtue in the statement of the Hachamim. וזו הכת עניית הדעת, and this ignorant sect of people, יש להצטער עליהם לסכלותם, right? You should be sorry for them for their ignorance. לפי שהם מכבדים ומנשאים החכמים כפי דעתם, for they elevate the Hachamim and they raise them up in their minds. However, in practice, והם משפילים אותם בתכלית השפלות. In practice, actually what they're doing is they're completely diminishing them for understanding and explaining to others, right, all sorts of bizarre statements of the Hachamim that the Hachamim never intended to be understood literally. והם אינם מבינים זה, but they don't even understand it. They don't even realize that while they're trying to elevate the Hachamim by saying, well, these are the Hachamim, they're wise men, and if they said it, it must be true. right? I mean, what the Hachamim said is true, but they were speaking in a parable. They didn't mean it literally. They were speaking poetically. But you're saying, well, the Hachamim, they're great, and they're extremely wise. So if they said that trees are going to bring forth clothing, I know what they're talking about, and trees are going to bring forth clothing. Instead of elevating them, they're actually diminishing them by putting all sorts of impossibilities in their house. וחי השם יתברך כי הכת הזאת מאבדים הדרת התורה ומאפינים זוהרה. Says, and this sect of people, they are diminishing the glory of the Torah. They are extinguishing the light of the Torah. ומשימים תורת השם בהפך המכוון בה. And they are explaining things contrary to what was intended by these statements. לפי שהשם יתברך אמר, because God said regarding this perfect Torah of his, Asher yishme'un et kol hachukim ha'ele. He says, when you come into contact with the goyim, with all the other nations, and they hear of the wonders of the Torah, they hear the wisdom of the Torah, ve'amiru, and they should say, Rak am hacham v'navon hagoy hagadol hazeh. Says, wow, what a wise and intelligent nation. This is this great nation of the Jewish people. V'hakat azot, however, this sect, when they come and explain the words of the Hachamim literally, right? Hakat azot מספרים משפטי דברי החכמים זיכרונם לברכה, מה שכששומעים אותו שאר האומות, right? When they speak these statements of the Hachamim literally to anyone else, right? Any of the nations, called the general public, how do they react? They say, Omrim, רק עם שכל ונבל הגוי הקטן הזה. Says, what an ignorant nation this must be, that they can possibly believe these kind of things. Right? And most of these people who are giving sermons out in public, this is the majority, he says, right? They are teaching in public, giving sermons on all these midrashim of the Hachamim and explaining things that they don't understand because they don't know how to read behind the literal meaning of what the Hachamim are saying. And only if these people would just be quiet and not speak. If only these people would stay silent and not speak, it would be considered a great wisdom for them. Or at least they should go up and, when they speak and quote a midrash, it should say, I don't understand what the Hachamim intend in this statement. All right, the Hachamim said something fantastic, something bizarre. I don't understand what they intended. I don't know how to bring a commentary and explain what the Hachamim are saying. However, they consider themselves to understand what the Hachamim are saying. Right? And they try to explain to the masses things as they understood it or as they misunderstood the statements of the Chachamim. Lo ma she'amru Chachamim, not what the Chachamim said. ודורשים בראשי העם דרשות מסכת ברכות ופרק חלק, right? And they get up in front of these huge congregations and they start telling all these midrashim that are in Masechet Berachot, the first Masechet of the Mishnah in the Talmud. And Masechet Berachot is full of midrashim. And Perek, the chapter that we're studying now in the Talmud, is full of midrashim, and many of them are very bizarre. And these people get up and they start quoting these midrashim and explaining them al pishatam, according to their literal meaning, milah b'milah, as if they're just translating word for word what the Hachamim said, without trying to understand the deeper meaning behind the Midrash. If anyone was here in the earlier courses that I gave, I gave one class on studying a Midrash. We analyzed the Midrash of Tanurosh and Achnai, right? All the Chachamim had a dispute with Rabbi Eliezer, and he said, if halakha kimuti, if halakha is like me, this tree will prove my point. And then what happened, according to the Midrash, that carob tree was uprooted and flew 100 amah. And then he says, if halakha is like me, this aqueduct will prove my point. He says, Hazru amayim la'achorehim, right? And the water started flowing in the opposite direction, from down up instead of from up down, right? A very, very bizarre midrash. Analyze, and I recommend whoever wants to see how the Hachamim speak, the code terms that they use, what they allude to. That was a very good example in that midrash, and so we analyzed it. So I'll refer you back to that class on Tanurosh and Achnai, the oven of Boa. All right, so Lakat Hashiniya, and the second sect of people, Hem Rabbim Gamken, there are also very many. Vehem Otam Shirau Divrei Hachamim Ushema'um. They're similar to the first in that they read and interpret the words of the Hachamim, Ve'evinu Otam Kefi Peshutam, and they understand it literally. וחשבו שלא כיוונו חכמים בו זולתי מה שמורה עליו פשט הדבר. And they too don't think that there was any other or hidden intention of the Hachamim besides the literal meaning of what they said. והם באים לסכל אותם ולגנותם. However, these people, they disrespect the Hachamim because they say, well, the Hachamim, they couldn't have really been that intelligent if they actually believe all of these things that they're saying, these bizarre statements that they make. They're crazy, they're nuts. And so they start bad-mouthing the Hachamim for saying all these bizarre statements, and they mock them. Right? And so whenever they have an opportunity to mock some sort of statement of the Hachamim, they'll take advantage of it. And they see themselves as more intelligent, more enlightened than the Hachamim, that they have a deeper understanding and better knowledge of the world. However, and they think that these Hachamim were ignorant people and no understanding of reality, no understanding of science, right? No understanding of reality. And we just call them Hachamim, but these people that we refer to as Hachamim, they really have no understanding of wisdom, and they aren't really Hachamim. I am a doctor, right? I went to university, and I know better than the Hachamim, because they say all these bizarre, really bizarre statements that are completely unrealistic. And most of these people, they are intellectuals back then. Mostly these intellectuals were doctors. Were people who, astronomers, or they think they're astronomers, maybe they're astrologers. But these people are wise in their own eyes. They perceive themselves as intelligent, intellectual, enlightened people, and they are smarter than the Hachamim, umhudadim, the philosophim. They see themselves as philosophers and as people, they're good at solving problems, technical problems. וכמה הם רחוקים מן האנושות אצל אותם שהם חכמים ופילוסופים על האמת. However, how distant are these people who see themselves as enlightened intellectuals from real philosophers and wisdom, real wisdom? אבל הם שכלים יותר מן הכת הראשונה. They are worse, they are more ignorant than the first act that said, והרבה מהם פיתיות, right? And they believe nonsense. והיא כת ארורה. This is a horrible, cursed sect. לפי שהם משיבים על אנשים גדולים ונשיאים, right? They are judging or degrading the Hachamim, people who are tremendous Hachamim, that their wisdom has been proven by they held the presidents of the nation, right? Presidents of the Supreme Court. People whose wisdom has been authenticated and verified by other wise people, intelligent people that came after them, right? The heads of the nation, one of the most intelligent nations today, all the intelligent people, they recognize the wisdom of these Hachamim. However, these intellectuals who spent, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years in university and think that they are now, they reached the pinnacle of intelligence, of wisdom, are now degrading these Hachamim, right, bringing them down because they couldn't understand that the Hachamim are speaking in riddles. ואלה הפתאים, אילו היו עמלים בחוכמות, if these people really dedicated themselves to studying science, to study philosophy and wisdom, עד שהיו יודעים האח ראוי לסדר ולכתוב הדברים בחוכמות האלוהות והדומה להן מן הדברים אצל ההמון ואצל החכמים, right? Because if they really dedicated themselves to advanced studies, they would know that this is the way all wise men speak. All philosophers, when they come to deal with things that are a little bit more subtle than, let's say, the movement of the stars, right? Things that are measurable by physicality. When they come to speak in metaphysics, all the Hachamim, all the wise men from all the nations, they speak in riddles. They speak in allegories. They speak in a poetic, in Melissa. So if these people really were intellectuals, really dedicated themselves to being wise and to studying and developing their intellect, they would know that this is the way Hachamim speak, not just our Hachamim, but all wise men throughout all cultures. ויבינו החלק המעשי מן הפילוסופיה. אז היו מבינים אם החכמים זיכרונם לברכה חכמים או לא. Then, if they reach that level of intellectual maturity where they understand that Hachamim speak in riddles, then they'd be at a level maybe that they can judge based on the statements of these Hachamim, if they really are intelligent or not. However, they are way beyond, the Hachamim are way beyond the understanding of these people who perceive themselves as intellectuals. Right, so they would see that these Hachamim are speaking about better realities, they're speaking about patterns, they're speaking about things that define our reality, and they would maybe understand what it is the Hachamim are referring to, and understand the message that the Hachamim are trying to teach us in these metaphors. V'hakata shenishit, and this third sect, v'hem Chai Hashem, right? It says, I swear to you in God's name, he says, me'atim me'od, they are very, very few. At she'en ra'ui nikrotam kat, they are so few that you can't even refer to them as a sect. Ela kmo she'yamed lashemesh min. Same way that you can't designate, you can't refer to the sun as a species because there's only one thing like that in our entire solar system, right? You can't refer to these people as a sect because they are so rare, there's so little of them among us. Vehem otam bnei adam, right? And this third sect are these individuals. שנתבהר אצלם גדולת החכמים זיכרונם לברכה וטוב שכלם. These are the people who understood, were able to see the wisdom of the statements of the Hachamim and see how refined their wisdom is. ממה שנמצא בכלל דבריהם מורים על עניינים אמיתיים למאוד. Right? These are the people who are able to understand that the statements of the Hachamim are referring to or alluding to things extremely real. Call it like a meta reality. Things that are more real than what we would refer to. We perceive reality as, let's say, the physical things in front of us. No, these are more real because they describe reality. They describe patterns in how the world works, human psyche, human psychology, right? People's behavior, historical trends. They understand that the Chachamim are talking about things that aren't describing the item in front of us or the tree that's growing, an actual tree that's growing clothing, right? But maybe, what does it mean when something grows on trees? When they say, oh, you think money grows on trees? What are our parents saying when they say, you think money grows on trees? They're saying that, things that grow on trees, we have an abundance of. There's tons of it, right? That's like the meaning behind growing on trees, things growing on trees. That you just go low picking fruit, that you just go and you pick something. But we use these metaphors all the time. And so when the Hachamim say that clothing will be growing on trees in Yemot HaMashiach, they're saying in the times in the Messianic era, there's going to be such tremendous abundance that clothing, like ready-made clothing, you won't have to work hard. It'll be like low-hanging fruit. There'll be abundance. You just go and pick it. It's cheap. You can get it anywhere, and there's so much of it, right? So they're describing patterns, they're describing things that are deeper than the tree growing a shirt. And even though these individuals, there's so few of them, and they're so spread out throughout the world, right? From their writings, from the books that they write, the commentaries that they write to the Midrashim, you can see, that proves, that's testament to these people's perfection and maturity in their understanding. And that these people understand the truth. And that these people also have clear understanding and distinction between what is unrealistic and impossible as opposed to what is has to be the reality of God, what's possible, what could be, and what is impossible. There is no way this can actually take place in our reality. And therefore, they can easily detect also when the Chachamim say something bizarre that maybe the Hachamim are trying to allude to something deeper than the literal meaning of their statement. They know that the Hachamim that they don't speak vanities, they don't say nonsense. Right? And these people, they have already confirmed and affirmed that the things that the Hachamim say, shedivrehem, their statements, yesh lehem nigle venistar, right? There is the superficial level of their statement, and there's a hidden level where you have to delve deep into the statement to understand what the Hachamim are really talking about. וכיהם בכל מה שאומרים מן הדברים הנמנעים, and that everything that they say, all these bizarre statements that are unrealistic that the Hachamim say, דיברו בהם בדרך משל וחידה, that they spoke in riddles and in allegories. כי הוא זה דרך החכמים הגדולים. And this is the way of the Hachamim. The language of the Hachamim is in riddles and in poetry. ולפיכך פתח ספרו גדול החכמים ואמר להבין משל ומניסה דברי חכמים וחידותם. And this is why the greatest, wisest man to ever live was Shlomo. He opens up his book. First of all, it's called Mishle, right? The parables. Mishle Shlomo ben David melech Israel, right? The parables of Shlomo, the son of David, the king of Israel. Lehavin mashal u'nisa, to understand parables, to understand allegories, u'merisa, poetry, to understand poetry. Divrei Hachamim vechidotam, the words of the Hachamim and their riddles. וידוע אצל בעלי הלשון כי חידה הוא דבר שמכוון בו בנסתר. Right, and anyone who knows linguistics, anyone who knows the Hebrew language, he knows that the word Chida that he's talking about over here, that Shlomo is talking about, Chida refers to the hidden part of the message, and not the superficial part. Lo banigne mimenu. Ukmo she'amar, as it says, Shimshon says, Achudana lachem chida, I'm going to give you, riddle you a riddle. לפי שדברי החכמים כולם בדברים העניונים שהם התכלית. Right, because the Hachamim, when they come to bring all these statements, especially when we're talking about Perek, Helek, Olam Haba, things that are so subtle, things that are so meta reality, right, metaphysical reality, the only way to communicate these ideas are through riddles and through parables. That's the only way to actually communicate these ideas. I think we'll stop here and we'll continue next week. Let's continue a little bit more. Says, and how can we accuse the Hachamim for making their statements in the ways of parables and allegories? ומדבים אותם בדברים הפחותים ההמוניים. ואנו רואים החכם מכל אדם עשה זה ברוח הקודש. Says, we see that the greatest of the Hachamim, right, Shlomo HaMelech, right, he's perceived as the wisest man who ever lived. Right? He comes out openly and opens up his book saying, right, Mishle Shlomo ben David, the parables of Moshe, Navin, right, the Divrei Hachamim vechidotam, to understand the words of the Hachamim and their chidot and their riddles. ואיך יקשה עלינו לסבור של דבריהם להוציאה מפשוטם, כדי שיאות לשכל ויסכים עם האמת, עם כתבי הקודש. Says, and why should we find it so far-fetched to interpret the words of the Hachamim as allegories when we see the Hachamim do the exact same thing with Scripture itself? How many times do they say about certain passages in the Bible that it's a mashal, that it's an allegory? They themselves interpret passages in the Bible, and they take them out of their literal meaning, and they say, no, this is a parable. This didn't happen literally. And this is the truth. They said regarding the pasuk, that says, and he smote both Ariel and Moab, right? These two big cities, or two big kingdoms. Shukulo Mashal, it's a parable, they were exaggerating. The Chachamim said, no, scripture is exaggerating over you. He didn't kill everybody in those two cities by himself. And also regarding he went down and smote, he went into the pit and killed the lion. He says, he says this entire story, the Chachamim said this whole thing is a mashal, it's a parable. So the Chachamim are interpreting certain parts of scripture that seem unrealistic, and they say, no, it's not literal, it's a parable. Then why can't we interpret the words of Hachamim themselves as parables when they say unrealistic, bizarre statements? V'chen sefer Iyov bichlalo amru ketzatam mashal haya. You see, the entire book of Iyov, there's a dispute between the Hachamim. Some of the Hachamim say parts of it are allegory. Some of the Chachamim say, no, it's a true story. Some of the Chachamim say the entire book is a parable. It's not, it didn't actually take place as in our reality as we would perceive it. He said it's a parable without even saying what the message is behind the book. He says, go figure it out. This that I'm telling you, that it's not a literal story, and that there's a hidden message behind the story of Iyov, should be enough for you to go and try to figure it out yourself. And also the vision of the dry bones, where they arise and they take form and turn into people, right? Some of the Chachamim regarding that vision said, Mashal Haya, this was also a parable. Does it mean that all these things were really parables? You see the Hachamim themselves, some of them say certain stories, don't take them literally. So then why do we need to feel obligated to interpret the words of the Hachamim literally? And if you, the reader, are one of these first two sects who insist on interpreting the words of the Chachamim literally, he says, my books, they're not for you. Don't read what I'm writing. You're not going to enjoy anything that I'm saying. You're going to hate, you're going to despise what I'm saying if you insist on reading the words of the Hachamim literally. You're not going to find any value in what I have to say. He says the same way that a person who is so accustomed to eating bad foods, unhealthy foods, how is he going to enjoy eating good, fresh, healthy foods? It's not. He wants to go to the Berekas all the time. You know, if you're not giving him Berekas, you give him an apple, he's not going to like the apple. He wants the Berekas because that's what he's used to. That's what his body craves. But this is bad for him. And he despises it. He doesn't want vegetables and fruits. He wants only, the unhealthy pastas and Berekas. Says, see what the Bnei Israel said, who they were so used to eating, the onions and the garlic and the heavy foods, right? It says, and our soul, our nefesh, right, despises this rotten bread, right? This is the man, the most perfect, most nutritious food God designed specifically to sustain them in the desert, right? It says, no, we can't take it. We despise it. Why? because they're so used to eating, all of the fat foods of Egypt. However, if you are from or be part of this third sect, right? When you come across a statement of the Hachamim that doesn't make sense, that your logic kind of pushes it away, it's unrealistic. Ta'amod v'tidbored bo. Says stop and try to, delve into it. V'tidash u'achida u'mashal. And you should know that this is a riddle of the Hachamim, and this is a parable. They're coming to teach you something. ותשכב עשוק לב וטרוד הרעיון בחיבורו ובסברתו. Lose over them, right? Meditate on them for a long time. Try to figure out what the Hachamim are trying to teach us in this bizarre statement that you came across. ותחשוב למצוא כוונת השכל ואמונת היושר, כמו שנאמר, right? And try to find the true meaning behind it, as it says in Kohelet, also one of the books of Shlomo, נמסור דברי חפץ, וכתוב יושר דברי אמת, ואז תסתכן בספרי זה, ויועיל לך בעזרת השם. As it says, to find meaningful words and truthful words. So if you want to be of this third sect, the people who understand that Hachamim, they speak poetically, they speak in parables, they speak in riddles. When you come across a bizarre statement of theirs, and you stop, and you try to figure out what the Hachamim are really trying to teach us, really trying to say, right? If you're one of those people, and please read what I have to say, you'll enjoy it. Okay, and that's the end of this chapter. Any questions? And you want to share any objections, any questions, any insights? You said some harsh things about many people. All right, siyag lechachma shtika. Right, the Hachamim say silence is, how do you call it? Is a gateway to wisdom.
Okay.
All right, so I guess